He stood in a freezing garage at 6 a.m., staring at a wrecked sedan that looked beyond saving. And for the first time in his life, Caleb Brooks understood that metal could tell a story louder than words. Every dent, every crease, every shattered panel was a frozen moment of someone's worst day, and his job, somehow, was to erase it like it never happened. To take the worst minute of a stranger's life and polish it back into something they could drive their kids to school in without flinching. He started at level 1, the shop helper, 18 years old, sweeping floors in a small body shop on the outskirts of town for $12 an hour, breathing in dust and primer fumes that coated his throat like chalk, watching senior techs pull fenders straight with their bare hands like it was nothing, going home every night with paint speckled across his forearms and a paycheck that barely covered rent, eating the same cold sandwich for lunch beside a stack of crushed bumpers nobody had time to throw away, listening to old men with tobacco-stained fingers tell him the only way out of poverty was through a tool drawer, and slowly believing them as the months stretched into a year and the shop became more familiar to him than his own apartment. He learned to read damage before he ever learned to fix it. How a clean dent meant a slow driver. How a folded A-pillar meant somebody had walked away lucky. How the smell of coolant in a torn engine bay meant a job nobody wanted to estimate. And by the time he was 19, the foreman started letting him help disassemble cars, and the $12 an hour suddenly felt like the first real currency of his life. At level 2, he became a prep technician, sanding panels for 10 hours a day until his shoulders burned and his palms went numb, masking off trim lines with the patience of a surgeon, scuffing factory clear coat with gray Scotch-Brite until every reflection died, earning around $18 an hour, learning that 90% of a flawless paint job happens before a single drop of color ever touches the metal, and that nobody outside the shop would ever notice the work that took the longest, the work that left his fingertips raw and his lungs full of particles no mask could fully stop, the work that turned his weekends into recovery rather than rest. He started buying his own tools, $100 at a time, from the Snap-on truck that rolled through the lot every Thursday, signing little yellow tickets like promises to his future self, and by his second winter he owned a toolbox he could barely close, financed at interest rates he didn't fully understand, but it felt like armor, proof that he belonged in a trade that didn't easily let people in. At level 3, he picked up the welder, and everything changed. He was now a body repair tech, pulling frames on a chief machine, replacing quarter panels, MIG welding fresh sheet metal into place at $26 an hour, watching sparks rain down his sleeves as he slowly learned that a single bad weld could send a family through a windshield months later, and that responsibility settled on his chest like a second toolbox he could never put down, heavier than the first one he financed at Snap-on for $9,000 he didn't really have. He learned how a unibody flexes, how high-strength steel cracks instead of bending, how aluminum demands its own room and its own rivets and its own quiet kind of patience. He learned that bodywork wasn't carpentry, it was metallurgy disguised as labor, chemistry pretending to be sweat, and the cars rolling out of his bay carried lives he would never meet but would always, in some unspoken way, be responsible for. He earned his iCar certifications one online module at a time, sitting at his kitchen table after 12-hour shifts, eyes burning, coffee going cold beside a laptop with paint dust permanently embedded in the keys. Level 4 arrived when he became a refinish painter, mixing custom colors under fluorescent lights, spraying base coats in a downdraft booth at $65 an hour on flat rate, chasing perfect blends across factory clear coat, knowing one fisheye, one run, one speck of dust meant stripping the panel and starting over on his own time, and his hands began to ache in ways no one had warned him about, his knees popping when he stood, his nights filled with the metallic taste of solvent that never quite left his mouth no matter how much water he drank. He learned that color is never just color, that a 2018 pearl white from one factory is not the same pearl white from another, that sunlight changes everything, that the eye of an insurance appraiser can find a half-shade mismatch from 20 feet away, and that his entire reputation lived inside the 3 feet of air between his spray gun and a panel that had to look like it had never been touched. He bought a house at 26, small, one-story, the kind of place with a garage he immediately turned into a side job shop, painting motorcycle tanks on weekends for cash, sleeping 4 hours a night, telling himself it was temporary, even as it became the only life he knew. At level 5, he climbed into the estimator's chair, trading his respirator for a tablet, walking around crumpled vehicles writing supplements, arguing with insurance adjusters over labor hours and blend time, pulling in around $78,000 a year, learning that the hardest part of the trade was never the metal, it was the math, the photos, the phone calls, the customers crying in the lobby because their only car was totaled and the check from the insurance company wouldn't cover what they still owed on the loan. He learned to soften his voice for grieving widows whose husbands had died in the cars they were now signing away, to harden it for adjusters trying to deny structural repairs, to find the exact tone for a teenager whose first car had become twisted scrap before the first oil change. And he discovered that empathy, of all things, was the most expensive tool in the shop, and the one nobody ever sold you on a Thursday truck. At level 6, he became a shop foreman, running production for a 15-bay collision center, juggling cycle times, parts delays, painter tantrums, supplement negotiations, and a general manager who measured his worth in dollars per repair hour, clearing $95,000 a year while quietly developing a back problem he refused to acknowledge, because stopping meant losing his place in a line that never stopped moving. He started waking at 5, in bed by 10. His body running on routine the way an engine runs on timing. Every motion measured, every minute accounted for. And he watched young techs come and go, some staying, most leaving for warehouses or delivery jobs, or the simple mercy of work that didn't follow them home in the form of paint dust and aching knuckles. By the final level he owned the shop, Brooks Collision. 2 bays expanded to 8, then 12, then 16, a crew of 17, a 6-figure income on paper that mostly disappeared into rent, paint costs, DRP agreements, technician pay, health insurance premiums, and a new frame machine that ate half his savings the year he bought it. He wore clean jeans now, kept his nails trimmed, drove a truck without primer spots on the hood, had a daughter who would never know the smell of cold solvent on her father's coat because he showered at the shop before coming home. And yet on slow mornings, when the lobby was empty and the compressors hadn't kicked on, when the sun was just beginning to leak through the bay door windows and the radio in the back hadn't been turned on yet, he'd walk past the new helper sweeping the floor. Some kid, $18, $12 an hour, paint on his forearms, a cold sandwich waiting in a paper bag by the parts rack, and he'd remember the kid he used to be, the one who once thought a wrecked car was beyond saving. Then he'd pick up a sanding block, slip into the booth nobody was using, and quietly fix something himself. A fender, a door skin, a hairline crease in a quarter panel that the body men had passed on because it wasn't worth the time, because no matter how high he climbed, no matter how many trucks he owned or insurance contracts he signed, or speeches he gave at SEMA, the freezing garage at 6 a.m. never really let him go. And somewhere deep down, he knew it never would. Because once you've learned to erase someone's worst day with your own 2 hands, once you've stood in a quiet bay with a wrecked car and felt the strange, stubborn calling to make it whole again, you spend the rest of your life looking for one more car to save, one more story to rewrite in metal and paint, one more reminder that the hands you built your life with are still the only thing about you that can't be financed, can't be inherited, can't be replaced, only earned, slowly, panel by panel, day by day, in the cold morning light of a garage that asked everything from you and somehow, against all odds, gave you back a life worth driving home to.